good afternoon. I can appreciate how tired you are because I'm also tired, but I'm excited about this next session because it's when I get to invite all of my colleagues, not just my illustrious boss, Mayor Bill Peduto, to join us on stage. Hey, there we go. The whole team's together. So not that this crew needs much introduction in this room, but we can go down the line. Mayor Bill Peduto, our boss and leader. Kevin Acklin, our Chief Development Officer and also the Chief of Staff to Mayor Peduto. Ray Gastel, who we met earlier this morning, our Planning Director. City Councilwoman Deb Gross, District 7 here in the city and representing City Council. Robert Rubenstein, the Executive Director of the Urban Redevelopment Authority. Mary Conturo, the Executive Director for the Sports and Exhibition Authority. Tom Link, who works at the URA in our Innovation Department. And Kyle Chintalopoli, who is our Housing Manager in the Mayor's Office and a member of the Bureau of Neighborhood Empowerment. So I want to get this photo. It looks great. All right, loosen up, guys. Take a seat. And the format for the rest of the afternoon, it's something we talked about this morning, is really to have this group of people who are charged with taking your ideas and making them into a reality, hear presentations from each of the site groups, and learn a little bit more about the work that you did today. So it's my pleasure to get us started with our first consultant. I'll invite Noah Friedman from Perkins & Will up to present the Almano team's work. Thanks. You. Come on in.
Am I standing?
You're standing.
Okay. Do I really get 8 minutes? I think there's supposed to be a slide here.
There is.
So thank you. This is really a group effort. I was able to facilitate the Almano team, and thank you everybody for participating. So I'm honored to be the one that presents to you these recommendations, thoughts. So we did break it down into the three major topics. Planet, people, and place, with an overlay of performance and how do we measure performance and how do we actually make sure that we meet the goals that we set. So starting with planet, we are proposing that the Almano project be beyond net zero and not just generate enough energy, net zero carbon energy for the site itself, but start to export that energy to the rest of the city and the region. One of the things that came out of this group, one thought for how we can get that done is to create something called a 21st century zoning district. And this would be a district that would allow for flexibility and innovation to happen within this zone. And actually, there were many ideas about how that could actually go beyond just the city, but relate to state policies and regulations as well. And what we thought was, we would know that this was successful because we were actually exporting carbon neutral energy in the end. Okay? So in terms of people, we really thought, and I think everybody here would agree, the idea of an integrative community. And I said that at the beginning, Almano happens to be within the Hazelwood neighborhood, and we need to make sure that that happens on all levels. It's not just the social connectivity, it's economic connectivity, it's sustainability connectivity, it's a whole systems package. And one thing, how do we get that done, is moving from participation to co-creation, okay? Not just asking people to participate, but really getting people involved, community members at all levels involved in the creation of this place and this new extension of the community. And the third, and then we would know that this was successful because it reflected the diversity of the existing neighborhood, and people that live there would still live there 20 or 30 years from now. So place, that this place would be connected to the rest of the city and the region. And how we get that done is with 21st century mobility that connects to other parts of the city. And we would know that this has been successful because people could get to and from the Almano site in Hazelwood without a car. Okay. In terms of overall, we really we talked a lot about focused workshops on each of these topics, and probably really beyond the workshops to the idea that Alejandro was putting out this morning into this concept of co-creation, really getting the community and all stakeholders together to make this happen. Not just inviting them into the workshops and then giving them information, going away doing the work, coming back and feeding back, but having them actually involved in the work of making this place happen. And then another overall idea is establishing the Pittsburgh principles for sustainable development in the future. Many places, cities have done this. They're the Curitiba principles. These are principles that people know around the world, and we were just talking about this, that Pittsburgh really should be a model for the world. It's something that sets a standard for the 21st century in terms of sustainable development, and people around the world would be referring to the Pittsburgh principles. So those are the big ideas. It was a very lively discussion, and I thank everybody who participated, and I hope you still like me after having presented your ideas. So,
You will sit there. Thank you, Noah. I appreciate how difficult it is to summarize an entire day's work in less than 4 minutes, so well done, and I hope we give it justice in our comments back. Mayor, any initial thoughts or responses?
Well, I think, a lot of the discussion that created this conference was based upon the idea that Andre had about how we could push the envelope on this one site. And it started around the principles of sustainability. I had the opportunity, I don't know if Volker's here, there he is, to travel to Germany to see where Net Plus exists and has existed since the mid-1990s. So this isn't something that we can't do. We can do it. Like Grant was saying yesterday, we have to stop looking for the reasons of why it can't happen and tap the talent that's in this city to make it happen. Integrating the community, I think, is the key. That if we just redline this area, maybe we stop calling it Almano and start calling it Hazelwood. If we're going to create this new zoning, maybe it crosses 2nd Avenue and opens up the opportunities along there as well, but that would be something that would have to come from the community. Connected to the rest of the city and the region is absolutely critical. Hammarby and Stockholm was built around the premise of public transit, and it wasn't just built and then thought of afterwards, how do we get some public transit here? It was built with public transit, and I think we have to look at that and start really thinking outside the box with it. Obviously we have a rail line there, but if we don't have a willingness or a want of the owner to have commuter rail, well, we have access. And when we start talking about autonomous vehicles, the ability to run them directly from Hazelwood to Carnegie Mellon becomes a reality. And within just the next couple of years. So I think that a lot of these ideas sort of fit like pieces of a puzzle. And if we can hold this development to these standards and succeed, then any other developer that comes down the line and talks with these folks about public subsidy or the need to be able to build, we can show how it could be done in a way that does create the Pittsburgh principles for development.
Ray, I have a question for you because I saw your eyes light up. We said a 21st century zoning district. Any response to that? Any thoughts? It seems like an exciting vision, but our job is to make it a reality. How would that work?
Two different things, really. I mean, zoning districts actually can be 21st century and zoning districts can be more exciting than most of you know. But there really is a way, and there's all sorts of ways of defining. It's all about, because zoning districts make requirements, and it's how you define those requirements. And those requirements can be very flexible, or they can be very tight. The sweater can be loose or tight. And so either way, but we have to find a way that it reflects, in a contemporary zoning way, both some sense of how the form is going to work, but also a performance-based way of analyzing it. And I think when we look at that and the type of flexibility that Noah and the group were speaking about, that's got to be on their minds.
Absolutely. What about this issue of connectivity? I know it's been something we've talked a lot about. Chief Ackland, do you have any thoughts about the need for connectivity on Almano and the reasons why it's so critical for the development of that site?
Sure, thank you. It's crucial. I think, I actually grew up the hill from this site in South Oakland, and for native Pittsburghers, this was the LTV Coke site. If you don't remember, it's how I first understood what rotten eggs smelled like back when they made the Cokes. But the connection there to Oakland is transformational. We've actually started some hard work within our shop with our public works to identify a connection through Panther Hollow. Right up on the other end of Panther Hollow is Carnegie Mellon. And so the interest, if you were able to access this site through Oakland, also through 2nd Avenue, and for those who went on the tour today, perhaps the difficulty of accessing it is really a gating issue for development to occur here. So it's something that the good news is we have the right of way to make it happen. We have the leadership to make it happen, the political capital that we're willing to spend, and the partners through the foundations that own this site. And so I think that we're willing to make the public investments necessary to unlock this potential for access.
I think one of the major issues that came out of this also, and to the mayor's point, is around the separation of Almano, the term, or Almano, the site, from Hazelwood, and how we can, as a group, I mean, this is the group of people who would say the word Almano more than anyone else in the world. How can we go about changing that? What can we do to make sure that that real integration not only happens in our verbiage and in the way we talk about it, but the way that we plan for the site? Any thoughts on that from the group? Yes, Councilwoman.
I'll just take a leap, because I actually was really fascinated by the idea of a Pittsburgh principle and what that would be. And just even being on council for barely a year and a half, and having worked with the mayor now before we were elected here, was the people power in Pittsburgh. Yes, we have beautiful places. Yes, we have cutting edge technology. But what everyone tells you they love about Pittsburgh is the people. And sure, maybe that's just a kind of fuzzy notion, but I don't think it is. I mean, you can actually measure how tightly we're networked. We joke that there are not 6 degrees of separation in Pittsburgh, but only 1 degree of separation, right? And that's because we have so many layers of relationships among us. And we don't want to lose that. I do believe that's part of our regional competitive advantage. And so being people-driven is, I think, a way to really retain the identity of the place. That's what makes it Hazelwood, right? So putting those people front and center, and their stories and the places they care about, and it doesn't matter if it's a grand monumental building or it's a single cobblestone or a fence railing. That's what we value in Pittsburgh. It's those relationships, the history, the social history that we have together, and our connectedness between that social history and those places. And I think we should make sure we put that in the principles.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll just add a thought, not necessarily a solution, but the challenge we face here in Hazelwood is similar to what we're facing in the Lower Hill District, and that is, how do you take a clean slate adjacent to an existing neighborhood and make it a place that is equally owned by the neighborhood residents as well as new residents, and is welcoming to new residents, that doesn't feel separated like a barrier in 2 separate places. So that's really a challenge that we're facing, again, not only in this site, but in other larger ones in the city.
Great. Noah, what are we missing? What did you say in the room that we aren't covering right now that was critical?
Well, I think in terms of this concept of the extension of Hazelwood, I just really want to reinforce that. And then the idea of creating a place is so critical. I don't think that, I think just to reiterate what was said, if we don't create that place first, that is really open and available, not just actually for folks that live right next door in Hazelwood, but really everybody in Pittsburgh, or even the region and the country and the world. It's a place where people want to go. When you come to Pittsburgh, you need to go to the Mill Plaza. And then in the future, something that we all noted was the waterfront. The waterfront is, we didn't talk about that.
That was an easy softball.
Thank you.
How about that water?
The waterfront it could be one of the few places in Pittsburgh where everybody could get down to the water.
Absolutely.
There are some major barriers there. I want to make sure people are clear about that. The railroad owns a lot of land, and there's an active line there. And so that's going to take some pretty heavy lifting ideally by these folks on this side of the podium to help out. But it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Any comments on access to the waterfront? It's obviously an issue, but we have some creative solutions, hopefully.
Olympic kayak trials. So I'm always told that the grade is too high to be able to have a canal through there. And I said, just put up a couple slalom courses and let people kayak to the river. I'm serious.
How about the New York High Line?
How about it?
Yeah, the one thing I don't want to do, I mean, there's something that I believe it's called industrial chic, that there is something that's cool about old industrial things, and a lot of times you try and hide them or tear them down or scrap them, and instead we should celebrate them and put lights on them and show it as the bones of what built this city. So even as we're working down here and there's some old power line or towers and different things, we're trying to save them and show like that was part of our history. So I think, Volker, you're right. There's a way to do it. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So that'll be P4.1.
All right, with that, thank you, Noah, and thank you to all the teams who worked on Almano.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, next to the stage is Christine Mondor with Evolve EA in the Eco Innovation District.
All right, thank
Take
you.
it away.
Hi. I'd like to start off by thanking my team that was in the rooms with us. You guys, thank you for trusting us through this rapid fire process, and thanks to my facilitators, Stephanie Daines, Anna Rosenblum, and all the students from CMU. So with that, I will attempt to deliver an awful lot of ideas in a really short time. So we used the structure of what we imagined and what we wanted to achieve and how we would know we succeeded and how it would influence the city to report back our findings. And we had some very good alignment between our two groups. So I'm going to use language from both groups to describe our findings. First of all, we imagined an uptown that is an eco-innovation district, but the E stands for empowered and the I stands for involved. A lot of the conversation went to people as well as performance and place. And so that was a very powerful message for us, that when we talk about these other things, they have to be kind of focused on that area importantly. And the types of words that people used in describing Uptown were things that won't surprise you: people-friendly. We need green spaces that are connected, mixed income, prosperous, innovative networks and organizations. And so that might not be so surprising, but I think what came out of it is instructive for us as to how to approach it. We said that we could achieve it, and this was the projects area, we could achieve it by physically connecting and culturally connecting. Physically connecting meant that things you might expect, bike lanes, BRT, but not always in the same way that you expect. People were questioning where the BRT might go, whether or not we need a highway on the edge of the neighborhood. Two-way streets are something you might expect, but there was also an emphasis on challenging topography. And can we connect north to south as well as east to west? And so the first things we think about are the east to west connections, but we need to think about the north to south and physically connecting to our adjacent communities and seeing that as an asset. Our second category of connecting was related. It was cultural connections. And cultural connections had all sorts of different meanings as well. Connecting via opportunity. Opportunity could be things like micro-investment. There was a strong emphasis on understanding there's lots of good things going on in this community. How do you let this grow organically? And how do we get more of the people involved? I think people were struck by our presentation at the Paramount that said, we really want more people who live in the community to be in this space. And so that's the kind of ideas that came up through that. How do we get full ownership by all stakeholders, and how do we acknowledge that there are folks that are existing in the community, as well as there will be new people moving into those communities, and how do we invite them in? The second way of culturally connecting is by creating an environment that leverages those relationships. How do we design those spaces that allow for that mixing to happen? There's not a lot of that right now. You step outside the Paramount and you sound like you're going to be run over by a truck. So how do we create spaces that might actually facilitate that? So improved physical environment, livability that will attract people and invite that type of third space engagement, and creative public spaces. So with that, we'll know that we've succeeded. We've got, I've got pages of indicators for you, pages, but just a few. Maybe we see 5,000 new residents. I don't know, pick a number. 50 new businesses, that sounds kind of low. Maybe we need more than that. But of those 50 new, we probably need 25 that are guaranteed by folks who are already in the community, and that's an indicator that we need to look at. Increased walkability score, reduced vehicle miles traveled. How many times Uptown's mentioned in national newspapers? So those types of things might be part of an index, a kind of Uptown index of how we're doing. A new model, we know we've succeeded, we have positive indicators. How will we influence the community? We'll create a new model for grassroots development. And very similar to the last presentation, and for you, Ray, we are going to have the most interesting zoning code ever. That was a model zoning code that everybody will take home and read because it's so interesting. But the group wanted ideas like baked-in equity, full life cycle, and looking at performance criteria, performance-based zoning, as well as the kind of formal qualities that come with zoning. So the last thing I want to share was a very quick interaction that happened right before we came, where somebody challenged and said, well, these are good things for the mayor to do, but what could he do tomorrow? And that came to the idea that we need really from your team a commitment towards short-term activation and long-term policy change. Short-term activation are things on the street that build community and identity, that show proof to the community that things can change, that enable imagination and empower action. Tactical urbanism, different strategies of getting people where they are and immediately, so that while these long conversations happen about changing policy and getting people excited or even enabled to participate in zoning code conversations, they're already part of a process and kind of building that capacity. So that's it.
Great, thank you. Well, we can start with you again, Mayor. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so my introduction to Uptown was, I think, 11 years ago through the Gift Street readings of Sherry Flick. And I had the same preconceived notions about the neighborhood that 99% of Pittsburgh has. And I saw something quite different. It may be the most misunderstood neighborhood in the city. All the things that they're talking about, empowerment, involvement, culture, connections, already there. They've done it themselves. You know, the McNutts and what they've been able to do through preservation and bringing tech companies in. Rick and Sherry through the investments that they've made. James Simon carrying on his shoulders the cultural parts of it and enhancing upon it. And even with like Action Housing, one of the proudest things that we've done in the city is created passive housing for poor people. I mean, the only case that exists in this country. All of those different parts are part of what Uptown is, and I think that when I think of Uptown, I think about driving a car with 2 feet, one on the accelerator and one on the brake, because so much development will be happening there. The BRT will happen, and all the things that are being talked about in creating a different element to public space should be part of the BRT plan, because we're never going to be able to afford it. We don't have an endless capital budget to be able to do it, but if we made it part of the BRT plan, then we could start to see it and see the traffic calming and the quality of space along those corridors, even decorative lighting that is created specifically for Uptown, and different art that is a part of it as you go through it. But I also worry, on the other hand, so much in the past 30 years has been turning Uptown into the parking lot for Oakland and downtown, and how much has been torn away, and how people will now, once they start seeing this happen, jump in, and anything is good. And we have to make sure that, as we talk about those standards in Hazelwood, we have that long-term plan, that long-term vision that basically tells developers, this is a green light, you come with this, we're going to be behind you, RCAP, we're going to be behind you with TIF, we're going to be behind you to support it. You come in with this, a yellow light, don't expect any public support. You come in with this, red light, we're going to oppose you.
Yeah. Chief Acklin, how does that actually take form? I mean, when we're actually having conversations with developers and we're talking about RCAP and we're talking about TIF, I mean, how do we convey that conversation that the mayor's talking about a standard?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I think a combination of through our zoning as well, that we bake into the code some of these elements that we want to see happen, but also just a part of negotiation. And anytime anybody comes in, and I spend most of my day negotiating, it's actually kind of Mortal Kombat every day. But you know, I have a list of issues I know that the mayor was elected to do. When we're investing public capital into projects, we want it to be sustainable, community-driven, and so it's something that we'll work to achieve on a more systematic basis. But right now, it's part of it's what we do as an authority with the URA, which I'm fortunate to chair, as well as on behalf of the mayor. Specific to Uptown, I mean, it's a neighborhood I drive through every day, very fastly on the Boulevard of the Allies. And every time I drive up the boulevard, all I can think about is when you look out over the cliff, which is just up the other river, you know, how beautiful would it be to capture those views for the neighborhood, to not make this a pass-through neighborhood, but something that that exists between downtown and the Hill and Oakland, but to really capture that asset for the neighborhood. So when it's really bounded on both sides by Fifth Forbes and in the Boulevard, which, as Chairwoman Mondor indicated, is a highway. Yeah. If from a transportation perspective, if we could recapture that for the neighborhood and have access of you know, cross streets to really invest in that neighborhood, that was something that I'd love to see happen.
Yeah. So Tom, this is an area of town that is obviously ripe for innovation. There's several young entrepreneurs and startups and co-working space already happening. What's the future for Uptown in this arena?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, I think Uptown's a fascinating place. You know, in some ways, it's really a highlight not just for the city and the state, nationally and internationally, for its work in encouraging, you know, innovation companies. I mean, Start Uptown, the Paramount Film Exchange, the work of Urban Innovation 21 are real highlights for not just the city, but for the state and beyond. But it's also a fascinating place where I think there's an intentionality to that. Some of it's organic, and there's this fantastic work by folks in the community who have helped make that happen, but there is an intentionality to that. And you know, the reason some of the star companies that have come out of the city were born and grew right out of Uptown, and they were there for specific reasons. Some of it were incentives and capacity through KIZ, its access to Oakland and downtown. You know, I read, you know, empowered and involved, and I think about a next step. I think not just in Uptown, I think is sort of perhaps the place to start. To look at this is how do we get more inclusive in that, right? So how do we include folks from the neighborhood? How does the person, you know, 3 doors down from the Paramount Film Exchange who wants to start a business become part of that system? And I think that's a real challenge, candidly, for us. I think it's a challenge for the neighborhood. I think it's a challenge for policy. But I think a key issue is it was intentional on the tech side, and I think it needs to be intentional beyond. Good enough.
Kyle, this is also a part of town where housing is investments in housing, and some of the work that the mayor was talking about with Action Housing. Do you have any thoughts about where we are in that plan?
No, I mean, the projects that Action's done, and I know Linda's here. I don't know where she is, but there she is. Have been tremendous, and they really, you know, as the mayor mentioned with Net Zero, really pushed the envelope there when they put that application through with PHFA. It won the set aside for being innovative, you know, and now they've actually pushed PHFA to make that as part of their application. So, they should be commended for that and the great work that they've done. And I know Jean, through conversations with her, that they want to be intentional too about making sure that they're finding ways to encourage the market rate development to happen alongside with the affordable, and that's something that we're challenged as a city to really do that in a deliberate way, and that's something that we're working through. And I think the making sure that we're having the community involved, in the last group when they talked about co-creation, trying to do that in a much more be cognizant of that as we move along, in policy, not just with development. So,
any other reactions?
Sure. Excuse me, I'll throw one out. And while the infrastructure, particularly BRT, is going to be incredibly difficult to fundraise and implement, the thing that's great about Uptown is it's not an overwhelming size and scale of site. So continued incremental great things can happen and will happen and are happening. So that's something that while we think about what these large infrastructures and the public right-of-way take place, there isn't a 178-acre site. There isn't even a 10-acre site. So things will continue to happen, and they're manageable.
Yeah, small changes make a big difference. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
I cheated because I actually went to the eco district session before I was recruited to be on stage here. So I wanted to emphasize Christine's mentioning those north-south connections, which are also elevation changes, right? And so that's part of the challenge in the team we were talking about, it's not just the east-west that you think of as Fifth and Forbes and the busway route aren't the only neighboring neighborhoods. It's not just Duquesne and downtown and Oakland at the end. There's also the elevation change to the Hill District. And those are connections that need to be explored as well. And we had some ideas to generate how to do that, but to try to capture ways that you could have spillover from the neighboring communities to kind of start the ball rolling was something that our team also talked about. That is a potential, I think, for that site. So.
Great. Interesting stuff. Thanks, guys, and thanks, Christine. All right, our last site, I'll invite Blaine Merker from Gale Architects to come and speak to us about the Downtown Envision Downtown project.
Thank you so much for inviting me here and allowing me to speak on behalf of the group. And again, it's a sort of humbling process to be in a room and be on a tour with people for several hours and have so many good ideas come out, and to try and distill it to just a couple minutes. So I will do my best, and want to thank my group for all their thoughtfulness and kind of being willing to be imaginative in the process. So we looked at downtown and understood that there are a lot of market forces that are really going to transform downtown, going to add a lot of new people downtown. Downtown is going to be changing for the better. And yet we thought that the single thing that could improve downtown the most, we should keep it really kind of focused and simple. And we really, at the end of the discussion, were in agreement in both groups that we needed to imagine a downtown that prioritizes pedestrians. And if we could do that, if we could prioritize pedestrians in all design decisions and engineering decisions, traffic decisions, even development and programming decisions, that a lot of the other things would kind of fall into place. So we imagined that the way that would affect something like transit is that the transit experience of waiting for a bus, if you think about those folks as pedestrians as well, that you suddenly give that experience some dignity. You make the experience more comfortable, you give it more space, you give it more amenities for people to enjoy the time that they have to wait, and that could then in turn affect things like retail, which suddenly has a reason to capture some of those folks who might wait inside of a cafe while they're waiting for the bus instead of just waiting on the sidewalk. So essentially, we wanted to say focus on pedestrians first, put a high value on the quality of the environment that the pedestrians move through, and at the same time really sort of look at what's happening on the street currently. And I think we felt that that was a really necessary step to analyze what is happening out there. What is the allocation of space between the pedestrians who use a street, use a sidewalk, the people who ride the bus, and the people who are in their private automobiles or on their bikes, and look at how much of the street is actually allocated to those users currently. And that would be the first step, is just simply understanding what's going on and making a reallocation of that space based on who is using it today. So that would be sort of step one. So we would achieve that through data collection, evaluation, and after, and sort of for short-term experimentation through pilot and demonstration projects. Definitely bike lane extensions would have to be a big part of that, but things that could be sort of bold but potentially temporary if they didn't work out. The way we achieve success is by more people feeling safe. And I think that came down to how do people feel, what is their perception of the street, surveying people, asking them where they choose to walk, measuring people's walks, measuring the time it takes people to move, getting crowdsourced information, using technology to track people's movement, to have people opt in, passively create that data that we could analyze. And there'd be all sorts of smaller moves that are informed by that bigger move of the focus on the pedestrian, like making the signalization of each intersection work better, making them smart, making them talk to each other, try out some different ways of prioritizing pedestrian crossings, and interviewing and surveying people as to how happy they are when they're downtown. I think this is a pretty great idea that let's actually ask people how happy they are and track that over time and see how those changes influence people's emotional state when they're downtown. Obviously, the bikeways have to be connected to where people are coming from. We talked about identifying funding mechanisms, actually, to capture some of the value. So the market is going to be doing so much downtown, but a high-quality public realm that people feel comfortable in and want to spend time in and be slow and spend more time in is going to create more value for that development. So how do you capture that? Is there a mechanism you can use to start getting some of that paid for, basically? Success performance measures. We looked at just as Christine said, a number across the board. I mean, we definitely want to see an increase in the number of people walking and biking and using transit. We'd also want to see an improvement in the quality of those experiences, so how people report that experience feels to them. And that especially includes the most vulnerable people, kids and older folks, who often are impacted the most by a low-quality walking experience. And we really felt like we should embrace Vision Zero. It's an easy set of metrics and an easy vision to get your head around. Nobody should be getting killed because they're a pedestrian. And another thing is that storefronts, we thought, would come along with that. So a good part of the sort of pedestrian experience is that street wall that creates the experience. So another metric might be the number of feet of high-quality storefronts that start to spring up to serve those pedestrians. We talked a little bit about people's favorite places downtown, and there were 3 or 4 that were mentioned. Probably you can guess what they were. And what they had in common was they were all slow spaces. They were all places that people could slow down, could enjoy life, could sit, could enjoy the sky and the sort of watching people and didn't feel rushed. So I think a great metric would be to increase the number of places that people say when they say that, from those 4 to like 10. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, one last time, Mayor.
Yeah, so I'll be brief on this one. So those of you who were here for the intro, remember yesterday I was telling you about the 4 phases of Pittsburgh and how it started as a fort, and then they built that goofy double grid system that we still have today, and then the industrialization. And so downtown was basically built. I mean, we had mills in the point, and we had to get steel through town. And we had horses and everything else, and it wasn't until 1945 that they decided they were going to update downtown. And what they did is they tore down a lot of buildings, they built parking garages, they widened streets, they did everything for the automobile. And we haven't made any changes since then. So when we start talking about a complete street model, we're taking that first step. We have a system that has been designed and built that really can't get to the things that we want to be able to get to until we put both a capital budget, which we're committing $35 million, and all the different changes that need to happen with it as well. So we're now at that point where we're going to be able to take a model of 1945 and update it. We have bus routes that are existing today that were changed and go and make U-turns on streets because PPG was being built, and we never switched it back. The building's done.
20 years ago.
The idea of being able to look at this whole area, you know, when you come through the Fort Pitt Tunnel and you see it and you get that pride, it's not by chance. It's because people gathered like this. Well, actually, they gathered at the Duquesne Club in a closed door with cigars. But people gathered, and they came up with this idea and the zoning it would create so that light would be able to get in the middle of the city, that it would be built and there would be a park at the front. Now it's our turn.
Director?
The only thing, this is a great list, and thank you so much for the work that folks did. The only thing, though, is I'm going to, I feel awkward reminding you of a Jan Gale point, but you know, the statement usually in the analysis that the human brain needs stimulus every 4 seconds. And I only bring that up because there was with the emphasis on slowing and so forth, I think it is important to remember that downtown is supposed to be exciting and stimulating. And and I know you know that, and I'm speaking to the converted, but I just want to sort of emphasize that in those measures of success, one of the reasons we want to go to downtown, you know, where all the lights are, is because there's a kind of exciting program of human beings which are doing a lot of different things, and that the type of downtown that actually feels that way, and the type of streets that feel that way and have a kind of interactivity that is a kind of density of urban interaction, is something that we should be striving for in this area as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I just want to add, obvious point for those who went on the tour. The last 10 years, this is the fastest growing neighborhood we have in the city. It never was a neighborhood. It was the place where people came and left at 5 o'clock when they left to go home. It's now the hottest housing market that we have in the city. And so these investments that we're making on behalf of the entire region, it's also the economic generator for this entire region. But it is now becoming a place where people live. We're seeing, you know, young people and empty nesters both on the demand side wanting to come and live in Pittsburgh, in downtown Pittsburgh. And soon that definition of downtown will come up, and it's already starting to come up into the Strip District. And so that's an exciting thing, I think, for those investors who sort of started in the condo market 10 or 15 years ago. It took some time to get started, but this is when the mayor talks about areas of the city that are on fire and we're looking to throw gas on, this is definitely one of them. You know, always have to keep our mind on affordability to make sure that we're not, as this growth happens, we're not pushing people out, but mindful of the planning that'll happen with this. People, you know, this is now a neighborhood, which is a very exciting thing to see. A residential neighborhood.
What about the proposal to do Vision Zero? It's certainly something that's been talked about nationally. Does that seem like an attainable goal for us in the city of Pittsburgh, to have no fatalities from pedestrians in the city proper? Did I just scare you all? You look scared.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously a goal to get to. I don't think that we are in the same position as other cities, though. I mean, had we been doing the changes since the 1980s that other cities have done in creating pedestrian safety, in creating accessibility with bikes, then yeah, we should be, but we are coming from behind. That's why the Complete Streets model is the vehicle to get us to a Vision Zero model. We should take the principles of Vision Zero and make them part of what we're doing in all of our neighborhoods, the same way we're doing with Complete Streets and planning. But simply trying to get from where we are now to Vision Zero would be like asking me to write a paper on the tactics of bullfighting in Portuguese. It's taking two different steps at once, and I would rather have success to try and show people how and why creating a complete streets model does work, because we're still fighting the bike lash. Instead of trying to do something simply because other cities are doing it and seeing it fail and then proving to them it doesn't work.
So what's bike lash? I'm not familiar with that term.
It's when you get this little rash on your elbow. It's really itchy.
But it's certainly something that we deal with in the mayor's office.
Yeah, no, the vision is Vision Zero. The vehicle to get there is through complete streets, getting the infrastructure in place, and then being able to use the principles of Vision Zero so that we have streets where people don't get killed crossing the street. We have streets where people get killed crossing the street. And so everything should be based upon that. But I wouldn't want to set, now I'm being the grants person.
Oh, called you out.
We got hills. You can't do that. But we need to get some capital money in place first to do the things that are needed to be able to make the streets a little bit more safer.
Right.
I wish we'd been investing for 20 years like every other city.
Agreed. Councilwoman, any thoughts on complete streets and pedestrian safety? You certainly have a lot of bikers in your district and a lot of young people who are...
Yeah, come on down to some of the neighborhoods in District 7 who are demanding increased bike and pedestrian safety. We have most of the Bike Pittsburgh membership as residents of District 7, and I think all of the staff and the offices of Bike Pittsburgh in District 7 in Lawrenceville. So, but it goes throughout all the neighborhoods in the district. I can show you my constituent calls, my office logged into a database that are demanding safer crosswalks, and on Wellesley, on Baum, on Davison, et cetera. I mean, street after street after street, because what we've done is rearranged everybody. So there are shops where there weren't shops for 50 years. There are art schools where there used to be schools. There are new housing where there weren't any, and there are businesses where there weren't businesses for a long time. And so the patterns have changed. As well as a lot of the millennial generation are living in these neighborhoods, and they have never owned a car and don't intend to. So we have the demands on those streets, and they're densely populated. We've got live, work, play right on top of each other. Only now, there are a lot of households that have 4 cars because there's 4 apartments, and 100 years ago when those streets were built, there weren't any cars. So these were all trolley car neighborhoods. So we are struggling to figure out how to do it well. But I certainly have a lot of constituents who would welcome complete streets throughout some of our neighborhoods.
Robert, what do you see as the role of the URA in a project like this in helping us to rethink downtown, and especially when we're talking about funding vehicles and TIFs and otherwise, what can we expect from the URA?
I think it's what we heard was figuring out how you capture the value that is being created by making these investments. So, helping to look at creative financing methods, I would say.
Well, you're the experts at that, so. All right, thanks, guys, and I appreciate it, and thank you very much, Blaine.
Thank you.
Another round of applause. So we're at the final part of the program, and I'd love to introduce Andre Heinz and the mayor to step up and say a couple closing remarks before we end for the day.
Hey, buddy. Good to see you.
Fun to see you here.
Yeah. Well, a couple of days of gathering people together. People have a vision of what can be done around the world. People from Pittsburgh who are on the ground floor of doing it. I hope that it's been to what we talked about a year ago.
I think absolutely. As I mentioned at the outset, this is really just a continuation of one of the bedrock character traits of Pittsburgh, which is that we get together as a community because we share so much. And one of the good things about this is it reminds us how much we have in common. I think we actually have everybody here as colleagues and they share values. And the fun thing is we check in with each other, we realize, oh, we really do. And then we can update where we are. And bringing in our guests from Scandinavia and elsewhere allows us to have the confirmation that I think our aspirations are as real as we sometimes fear they are. So it's really great.
A couple of the things I think people should know too, that doesn't end.
No.
P4 doesn't end today. There's already discussion about what we can do over the course of the next year and having different ways for the interaction to happen both on a grassroots level and still at the level where we want to take Pittsburgh internationally.
Absolutely. As you know, we're not going anywhere, and we hope you aren't either. And
No.
so it's really been, this is sort of an inflection point in a conversation that has preceded us. Someone mentioned Renaissance 3, and it'll continue on. And of course, the key thing is to follow the conversation with action when action is called for. And we got the leadership in this room, and we just have to make the right choices.
Well, I think to everybody that's here, thank you.
No,
Thanks for committing yourself the past couple of days. I hope you had fun. I mean, it's a group that I know loves to talk about cities, loves to talk about the new ideas, and loves Pittsburgh. And having the opportunity to be able to do it on a basis where you hear from others, that's the right way to do it, you're right, I hope is reassuring to you to keep doing it. The other thing, and something Kevin and I were whispering to while we were going through that campaign, we kept having a comment that was, good enough is not good enough anymore. And I think that that really summarizes what we're trying to talk about. The days of this city being in an abyss, going through a depression, going through a recession, where any development was looked at as a positive, are gone. We're now going to be looking at the best developments for this city as we take it into this next era.
You get an amen from me.
Amen, brother. Thank you.
You got it. Thanks.